Creating the 3D tiger in Life of Pi was a year-long endeavor in itself. The VFX studio that worked on it spent roughly 12 months on research, development, and asset creation, specifically for the tiger. It is actually estimated that 40% of the efforts were from the new technology developed during this project, covering the tiger's hair and fur, how it is lit, muscle and skin systems, etc. Director Ang Lee first approached a VFX studio called Rhythm and Hues in 2009. He asked whether a digital animal could look convincing in stereo 3D. Their previous 3D lion, which was Aslan from Narnia, used the same technique, and it enhanced the creature's realism. So every detail had to hold up under the scrutiny of 3D. The initial results he saw were very interesting to say the least, so he entrusted them with bringing the digital tiger to life. His vision was clear. The tiger should be utterly realistic and animalistic. So how did they exactly do that? And why you can tell the difference between the real and the 3D tiger? From the beginning, the VFX team grounded their work in real tiger references. The studio arranged for 4 Bengal tigers to be present during production, to be studied and occasionally filmed. VFX supervisor Westerhofer and his team spent about 8 weeks closely observing and filming these real tigers in various lighting conditions and different situations. I think this proved invaluable in capturing authentic tiger behavior in addition to their anatomy, because even the most skilled animators in the world need visual references. You see, a real tiger's physique is essentially a solid mass of muscle with a loose back of skin, like a cloth draped over it. So they studied tiny nuances, such as the shoulder ripple that occurs when he shifts his weight. And by having this extensive high-speed footage of real tigers moving, the team could ensure that the 3D tiger replicated those subtle motion cues, from the flex of muscles under the skin to specific gait and posture quirks. In fact, Rhythm and Hues based the digital model's appearance on a real tiger named King, one of the 4 reference animals. They photographed every detail of King's fur, I mean his markings and anatomy. As you might expect, the look of Richard Parker is based closely on King. They used photos taken in France to get every nuance right, then reworked his coat to account for how his fur has grown over time. The modeling process began with sculpting the tiger's form to match King's proportions and features. Artists built a highly detailed 3D model in line with the real tiger anatomy, refining it interactively against reference photos and footage. The interesting thing is that the final digital tiger had more than 10 million individual hairs and countless skin variations, so the geometry and surface detail had to support that level of realism. To capture the tiger at different stages of Pi's journey, the studio actually constructed multiple versions of the model. They built 4 adult tiger models for various poses and conditions, and even an adolescent tiger version with slightly smaller body proportions and larger paws for the early scenes. As Pi and Richard Parker's ordeal progressed, the VFX team faced a real challenge. The tiger lost weight and energy, so the rig needed to accommodate a range from robust to gaunt. Rigging artists created a complete muscle anatomy for the tiger under the skin, so when the tiger moves, each muscle flexes and slides as it would in a real animal, driving a secondary motion in the overlying skin. In fact, the team layered 2 simulated skin layers on top of the muscle system to mimic the loose skin sliding over the fat and muscles, which is the bag of skin effect that real tigers have. This gave the 3D tiger a kind of authenticity when it came to size and weight, with subtle skin ripples and folds as it shifted postures. Certain parts of the tiger required especially fine rigging. The paws turned out to be extremely complex, and here is the interesting thing. They had as many controls in the rig's paws as they had in the entire facial rig in Aslan, the lion from the movie they made years ago. Each toe, claw and ligament in the paw was rigged to articulate realistically. You can even see the tiger's claws react and extend with the correct sheathing motion in some shots. The facial rig was also sophisticated, but Rhythm and Hues took a somewhat different approach there. Because the tiger's facial muscles are relatively small, and a lot of expressiveness comes from rigid features like the eyes and jaw movements. So they relied on a library of bend shapes for facial expressions. In other words, instead of driving every facial nuance purely by simulating muscles, they sculpted numerous facial subtle poses, like snarls, blinks, air positions, lip curls, etc., based on real tiger expressions, and allowed animators to interpolate those. This ensured the 3D tiger's face could match the real tiger's expressions without exaggeration. The team would even show their animated facial tiger tests to the tiger trainer to verify that the motions and emotions look similar to a real animal. One of the greatest challenges in making Richard Parker was rendering his fur. Tigers have dense, stripped coats with complex colors, and in his story, the tiger is often wet or sunlit in dramatic ways. Rhythm and Hughes ended up giving the 3D tiger around 10 million individual hair strands. Each one is modeled and rendered. The studio had extensive prior experience, with fur, having worked on furry creatures in earlier films, but Life of Pi pushed it further. The fur tool at the studio has continuously evolved over the last decade. They built the fur groom based on King's actual coat pattern, and could adjust length, thickness, and even the clumping of wet fur as needed for each scene. Rhythm and Hughes pipeline for creatures is built on proprietary software integrated with some standard tools. Animation was done in Rhythm and Hughes in-house software called Voodoo. Lighting and rendering was done in Renderer, and final compositing in a system named Icy. These custom tools were augmented by industry-standard 3D software as well. For example, the team used Autodesk Maya and Mudbox for some modeling and sculpting tasks, and Houdini for certain simulations. The fur itself was handled by a specialized hair and fur module, and the animators typically did not animate their hair manually. Instead, they animated a proxy geometry, a simplified foreshell, or guide hairs, to get a sense of the volume after the character motion was approved. Technical animation artists would run hair simulation so that the hair strands reacted naturally, swaying with the tiger's movement, catching the wind, or draping when wet, thanks to extensive testing. By the final production, there were few surprises in how the fur behaved. The physical accuracy was such that only minor tweaks were needed. Rendering millions of hair fibers together with complex water and lighting was computationally intensive. Scenes in broad daylight required convincing global illumination on fur, while night scenes needed every raindrop or splash reflecting in the tiger's coat. The studio's render engine was optimized for hair and could handle the huge amount of strands with detailed shading. According to the VFX team, if one single computer tried to render all the VFX in Life of Pi, it would take around 1600 years. Animating Richard Parker was a delicate balance between conveying emotion and not betraying the reality of a wild animal. It was roughly 40 animators dedicated to the tiger. They closely studied hours of footage of real tigers, observing how a tiger's gait has a certain heaviness, how its head moves when breathing, how its eyes and ears convey alertness or fear, and an interesting discovery came with the tiger's eyes. Unlike primates or humans, tigers' eyes don't roll dramatically in their sockets. Initially, the team tried to adhere to this realism, keeping the eyes' movement very minimal. However, they found that when they stuck to this too closely, it looked bad. A tiger does not move its eyes to some extent, so they had to find the right balance. Enough eye motion to look natural and expressive, but not so much as to feel weird or cartoonish. So the animators would often run their work by the tiger experts to double-check authenticity. Even though making the tiger itself was very hard, the hardest sequences to create were unquestionably those involving water interaction with a CG tiger. The tiger spends much of the film on a lifeboat, surrounded by ocean, and in several scenes he gets wet, swimming in the sea, splashed by waves, or drenched in rain during storms. Simulating water itself realistically is a notorious VFX challenge, and here the team had to simulate water affecting fur and fur affecting water. But here is the problem. the tigers being done in one software package and the water was done in another software, so they had to make different teams collaborate closely all the time in these sequences. And here is an interesting fact. Although Richard Parker appears frighteningly real, the vast majority of his scenes are actually 3D. As I said before, about 86% of the tiger shots used a digital tiger, with only a small number of shots, roughly 14%, or 20 to 30 shots actually used a live tiger. The real tigers were primarily used for brief insert shots without the actor. For instance, quick cuts where the tiger is alone in frame and performing a simple action, such as laying or swimming. These few real clips were seemingly intercut with the CG tiger. By doing that, it set the bar high for the 3D tiger, so that the VFX team couldn't cheat at all. Well, simply because the tiger had to be indistinguishable next to the real footage, pushing the artist to create something incredible. And there you have it, guys. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Also, please subscribe to the channel to receive more videos like this. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.